People vanish every single day. Most of the time, there's an answer, a tragic accident, a difficult choice, a crime that eventually unravels. But every so often, someone disappears in a way that breaks all the rules. No body, no suspect, no motive, just a person who was here one moment and gone the next, leaving behind a trail of clues that lead absolutely nowhere. Today, we're looking at 5 of the strangest, most chilling disappearances ever recorded. Cases that have stumped detectives, obsessed amateur sleuths, and in some instances, changed the way entire countries think about safety. Get comfortable, because by the end of this video, you may never look at an empty road, a quiet beach, or a knock at the door the same way again. On Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, George and Jenny Sotter put their 9 children to bed in their cozy 2-story home. The youngest had been given new toys earlier that day. The family had just celebrated together. Everything seemed normal. In the early hours of Christmas morning, the house was suddenly engulfed in flames. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children managed to escape. But 5 of the Sotter children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, ranging from 5 to 14 years old, were never seen again. Here's where the story stops being a simple tragedy and starts becoming one of America's most enduring mysteries. In the weeks before the fire, the family had received strange phone calls. One night, a stranger had come to the house asking for work, and while walking away, pointed out 2 fuse boxes and said something odd, almost like he was studying the wiring. Another man reportedly told one of the Sotter boys that the house would go up in smoke and the children would die in their sleep. On the night of the fire, the family's phone line had been cut, and not by the fire, because the wires were found severed at a point too high for flames to reach. When George tried to use a ladder to reach the children's upstairs windows, the ladder he always kept by the house was missing, later found dumped in a ravine far from the home. When he tried to use his work trucks to siphon water, both vehicles mysteriously refused to start, despite running perfectly the day before. And then there's the fire itself. Witnesses said it spread with terrifying speed, consuming the home in under an hour. Yet when the family searched the basement the next day, hoping to find some trace of remains, they found none. No bones, no teeth, nothing. Even though a coroner later testified that a fire would need to burn at over 2,000 degrees for 2 hours straight to fully cremate human remains, far longer and hotter than the Sotter house fire appeared to have burned. The local fire department, despite being just a few minutes away, didn't arrive until morning, hours after the blaze began. For years afterward, the Sotters received tips, sightings, and even photographs that they believed showed their children, grown into adults, living elsewhere. One photo of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to their son Louis was sent anonymously in the 1960s with no return address. The Sotters erected a billboard along the highway near their home with photos of the 5 missing children and a standing reward, which remained up for decades. George Sotter died in 1969, Jenny in 1989. Neither of them ever stopped believing their children were taken, not killed in that fire, but kidnapped, possibly because George, an Italian immigrant, had publicly criticized Mussolini's regime years earlier and may have made enemies within the local Italian-American community with mafia ties. To this day, no one has ever explained the missing ladder, the cut phone line, the disabled trucks, the absence of remains, or the photograph of the man who looked exactly like a boy who supposedly burned to death decades earlier. On January 26, 1966, Australia Day, 9-year-old Jane Beaumont, her 7-year-old sister Anna, and their 4-year-old brother, Grant, set off for a short bus ride to Glenelg Beach, near Adelaide, South Australia. It was something they'd done many times before. Their mother expected them home by lunchtime. They never came back. Witnesses reported seeing the 3 children playing near the shore that morning, and several recalled them in the company of a tall, thin man with a tanned complexion and blonde or light brown hair. Someone the children seemed comfortable with, as if they already knew him. Around midday, a postal worker said he saw the 3 Beaumont children walking with this same man, heading away from the beach toward a nearby shopping area. After that, nothing. No struggle, no screams, no bodies, no trace. What makes this case so deeply unsettling is what happened afterward. Several witnesses reported that, in the days following their disappearance, 3 children matching the Beaumont kids' description were seen at a local bakery, paying for items with a large note. Far more money than the children would have had that morning. If true, it suggests someone gave them money after they vanished, and that they were still alive, at least for a little while, moving freely through a public space without anyone realizing they were the subject of a nationwide search. The case triggered the largest search operation in South Australian history at the time. Thousands of leads were investigated. Psychics were consulted. The family received letters claiming to be from the children, some containing details that seemed eerily specific, though none ever led anywhere. Decades later, attention turned to a wealthy local businessman named Harry Phipps, who had a property near the beach and was reportedly known to give jobs and money to local children. In 2013, searchers dug up the backyard of a factory once owned by Phipps, acting on a tip from a former employee who claimed to have buried something there around the time of the disappearance on Phipps's instruction. The dig turned up nothing conclusive. Phipps had died years earlier, and no charges were ever filed. To this day, the disappearance of the Beaumont children remains Australia's most famous unsolved case. It fundamentally changed how Australian parents viewed their children's independence. An entire generation of kids who used to roam freely were suddenly kept close. And somewhere in the more than half a century since that sunny Australia day, the truth about what happened to Jane, Anna, and Grant has never surfaced. On the evening of February 9th, 2004, 21-year-old University of Massachusetts nursing student Maura Murray packed a bag, withdrew money from an ATM, bought several bottles of alcohol, emailed her professors claiming a family emergency, and got in her car. She told her boyfriend she was going skiing. She told her sister something completely different. None of it was true. There was no family emergency. She drove north into New Hampshire. Around 7:30 p.m., on a snow-covered stretch of Route 112 near Haverhill, her car skidded off the road and into a snowbank. A passing school bus driver stopped to check on her. He said she seemed shaken but unharmed, and when he offered to call for help, she told him not to. She said she'd already called AAA for a tow. She hadn't. Phone records show no such call was ever made. The bus driver left to call the police himself anyway. By the time officers arrived, just 7 minutes later, Maura Murray was gone. Her car was still there, locked, with her phone, wallet, and a glass of spilled wine inside. Her purse was missing. There was no sign of forced entry, no blood, no footprints leading away that investigators could definitively trace. Search dogs were brought in and picked up her scent, but the trail seemed to stop near a river, as if she'd either gotten into a vehicle or, some have theorized, gone into the water. Divers searched the river repeatedly over the years. Nothing was ever found. What makes this case so maddening is the sheer number of small, strange details that don't add up. Why did she lie to everyone about where she was going? Why withdraw cash and pack a bag for a supposed short ski trip? Why deny needing help from the bus driver if she had nowhere to go in the freezing cold and snow? And how does a person simply vanish from beside their own car on a rural road in under 10 minutes without leaving a single solid clue? Theories range from a planned disappearance, that Maura wanted to start a new life and walked away on purpose, to abduction by someone who happened to drive by in that critical 7-minute window. Over the years, attention has focused on several people who were reportedly in the area that night, including a man with a violent criminal history who lived nearby, though nothing has ever been proven. More than 2 decades later, Maura Murray's case remains open. Her family continues to push for answers. Investigators have said they're applying newer forensic technology to old evidence, and amateur researchers still comb the woods around Route 112 to this day. But the central question, what happened in those 7 minutes, remains completely, frustratingly unanswered. On the night of February 24th, 1978, 5 young men from Yuba City, California, Jack Madruga, Jack Hewitt, Bill Sterling, Ted Wire, and Gary Mathias, all in their 20s and early 30s, each living with mild developmental or psychiatric disabilities, drove to nearby Chico to watch a college basketball game. They were close friends who played together on a local team for adults with disabilities, and a Special Olympics tournament was coming up that they were excited about. After the game, witnesses saw them stop at a small market to buy snacks for the drive home. That was the last confirmed sighting of all 5 men together. 4 days later, their car, a Mercury Montego driven by Madruga, who never let anyone else drive it, was found abandoned on a remote logging road deep in the Plumas National Forest, more than 50 miles out of their way and in the opposite direction from home. The car was undamaged, unlocked, with the keys left behind, and parked in snow that investigators later determined it could easily have been driven or pushed back out of. There was no mechanical reason for the men to have abandoned it, and yet they did. In the dead of winter, in the Sierra Nevada mountains, wearing clothes meant for a basketball game, not snow boots, not heavy coats, 5 men got out of a perfectly functional car and walked away from it into one of the most dangerous environments imaginable. When the snow finally melted in June 1978, search teams found the remains of 3 of the men scattered across a roughly 20-mile stretch between the car and an old U.S. Forest Service ranger cabin. Ted Wire's body was found inside that cabin. He had survived the longest, apparently for weeks, wrapped in makeshift clothing made from curtains. Investigators noted with disbelief that the cabin contained everything he needed to survive comfortably: food, blankets, and a propane heater with fuel. But the heater had never been turned on. Matches found nearby had never been struck. Gary Mathias's remains were never found at all. His shoes turned up in the cabin, suggesting he had been there at some point, but he himself simply vanished into the wilderness. To this day, nobody has ever explained why 5 men would leave a working car in the snow and walk for miles in the wrong direction, why a man surviving in a cabin stocked with heating fuel would never light it, or what ultimately happened to Gary Mathias. Theories range from a psychotic episode triggered in one of the men spreading panic to the group, to something or someone that frightened all 5 of them badly enough to abandon a warm car and flee on foot into a blizzard. Some have even compared it to the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia, another case where a group inexplicably fled into the snow from safety. Nearly 50 years later, the Yuba County 5 remains one of America's strangest unsolved mysteries. In the summer of 2014, 28-year-old German electrician Lars Mittank traveled with a group of friends to Golden Sands, a popular beach resort near Varna, Bulgaria. By all accounts, it was an ordinary lad's holiday, until one night, Lars got into a physical altercation with another group at a bar and was injured, reportedly suffering a perforated eardrum. His friends flew home as planned. Lars, in pain from his ear injury, stayed behind to see a doctor and catch a later flight. What happened over the next 48 hours is where the case becomes genuinely disturbing. Lars called his mother, sounding increasingly paranoid. He told her he believed the men who attacked him were following him, that they were everywhere, watching him. His behavior, captured later on hotel and airport CCTV, grew erratic, pacing, looking over his shoulder, acting like a man convinced he was being hunted. On the morning of July 8, 2014, Lars arrived at Varna Airport to finally fly home. He went to the airport's medical center for a checkup related to his ear injury, standard procedure before flying with an eardrum injury. Security footage shows him sitting calmly in the waiting area. Then, according to the footage, a construction worker in a high-vis vest walked into the room, and Lars Mittank exploded into motion. He bolted from the medical center, sprinting through the terminal at full speed, past security, past startled staff, and out into the parking lot. He was wearing only one shoe. The other had apparently come off as he ran. Cameras tracked him as he reached the airport's perimeter fence, nearly 8 feet of barbed wire, and somehow scaled it in seconds. On the other side was a massive sunflower field, stretching toward the horizon. He ran into the field, and he was never seen on camera again. He left behind his passport, his wallet, his phone, and his remaining shoe. Bulgarian authorities launched searches with dogs and divers, checking nearby lakes and farmland. Interpol issued an alert. Over the years, there have been scattered, unconfirmed sightings. A hitchhiker in Germany who resembled an older Lars, rumors from various countries. But nothing has ever been verified. What triggered his final, desperate sprint? Was it a genuine threat? Someone from the earlier fight finally catching up to him? Was it a psychological break, possibly worsened by medication he'd been given for his ear injury, causing a sudden and complete loss of touch with reality? Or did Lars Mittank choose, in that single terrifying moment, to disappear entirely and start a new life under a new name? More than 10 years later, the footage of his final sprint across that airport terminal remains one of the most watched mystery clips on the internet, and Lars Mittank remains officially missing.